So I want to talk about some of the ways that people were being poisoned in Amarillo. I saw it really explode in the city of Amarillo first, before I saw those same things start to blow up in other places. Um, and one of the ways that people were being poisoned, I'm going to call it poisoned. If now the first one is for people with epilepsy. If let's say that a chick or even a guy who is a known epileptic has been selected for trafficking or targeting. Um, uh, they will actually find pharmaceuticals that epileptics are not supposed to be taking, like the very worst medication that an epileptic can take. They'll make sure to find that and add it to the epileptics drug supply. And that drug supply, it could be uh, crystal methamphetamines, or it could be another drug of choice. Either way, generally, if it's an epileptic person and they have, a hard drug addiction like that, they've generally chosen a drug that isn't going to exacerbate their epileptic symptoms. But one person in particular, I did find out that and that's how I found out about this, he was actually putting a certain medication into this one girl's stuff, and he was doing that secretly, and she was having seizures, and then she would end up in the hospital, and he would basically be able to take, at least temporarily, ownership of her, take kind of like temporary ownership of, or control of her home, and apparently even her assets, and her bedroom specifically. She had a bedroom with a bathroom attached, and when she was gone, that was his room. So if he had plans, if he even just had plans for that room, he would put that medication into her stash, basically, and she would then begin to seize, to have seizures, and be shipped off to the hospital, where she would, I'm assuming, have those seizures pretty badly for a while until that medication began to leave her system. And then she would go through the withdrawal. She would then go through the withdrawal from the same, from what he was giving her, or from what she at least knew that she could try to get her hands on to, I'm assuming, continue her, um, you know, uh, addiction, her habit. She did hear me one time bring it up, and she was curious about what I had to say, but it seemed like that her hovering around over the conversation, acting like she was going to do something about it if she just learned more, but she really wasn't apparently going to do anything about it. She basically just continued to let that dude walk all over her and give her seizures and let her use her bedroom and all that. I can't even remember what the gal's name was, because he really made her that insignificant. And almost all of the stories that I even have to tell about that time frame and about those people have to do with events that took place in her house. You know what I mean? It was that important of a place and a time, but I can't tell you her name. And it was because he personally made her that insignificant of a person. And you wouldn't think that anybody would be able to make anyone else insignificant, but it is possible. That's one warning right off the bat, is if you're an epileptic, if you're a diabetic, a number of different ailments. I'm sure that someone who's twisted enough, and is potentially even getting paid enough, or thinks that they could get enough out of it, like your home, or um, I mean, this was bad. So anyways, if you have any kind of underlying health condition like that, stuff can be added to your stuff to exacerbate those symptoms and to cause, for you to even so much as go into a seizure, dude. The next thing I want to talk about is lotions, lubes, and oils. Oil-soluble drugs. I'm sure that you've heard of different solubilities. Think that I'm saying it right. Between, whether or not something's water soluble, oil soluble. Well, in this situation, they have chosen different oil soluble pharmaceuticals, and I've seen them take acetone and break those pharmaceutical pills down just the same way as I've seen them pull the pure out of the impure with acetone, for the people who know what I'm talking about. I've seen them break even Klonopins down with acetone, and it to be added to a number of different things. But in Amarillo, it was a kind of a crisis that people didn't know about at the time. And they were able to take these pharmaceuticals and put them in different oils and cause a person to go through any number of different things. And for each different, it was like they had a different oil for a different thing. Like one kind of oil could cause you retrograde amnesia, which means that you're not going to remember anything that happened within a certain time frame before the event and after the event. And the event is being administered the drug that would cause retrograde amnesia. Retrograde amnesia has been was a really, really big, huge part of it. And so what goes along with this, so they would use, and it wasn't just that, the different oils could cause a number of different things. We would call them side effects. So this is really odd. Like, you would think, okay, so they would mix the pharmaceuticals into things, sure, to cause the effect that the pharmaceuticals would give. But certain pharmaceuticals, they wouldn't just give them or add them because of the effect, they would add them because of their side effects. And so for a lot of these different things, the side effect of the medication actually mattered just as much, if not more, than the original effect of, or the first onset effects of whatever drug that they were administering. And so they could put these drugs into hand lotion, something as simple as hand lotion, or hand soap, the squirty hand soap at the sink. They can put these medications into lubricants. They can simply put it on a doorknob that they know that you're going to touch to open a drawer or open a door. open your car door. It can just already be there. All it takes is for you to just touch it that one time. And whatever medications or whatever is, within that oil can begin to take effect as soon as it is absorbed into your skin. And your skin actually does absorb these oils, and the drugs therein begin to take effect in even faster, actually, than they would oftentimes when administered orally. One time, one of the handlers, Gerald, I'm going to call him one of the handlers, okay? He and I got into this fight, and it was wintertime, and I was wearing a coat. And it was his coat, and we got into a fight, and I was like, F you, I'm leaving. And I began to walk away. Well, he chased after me, and he grabbed his coat and took his coat off of me. And I was just like, oh, that's messed up that you're taking a coat while I'm walking in the wintertime, I guess. You know what I mean? And I kept walking while he wasn't taking my coat just to take my coat. He was taking my coat because he was about to put some of that stuff on me. And he had threatened to MDK my entire family. And then he ran up to me and he put that oil on my skin. And I knew as soon as he put that oil on my skin, we both looked at it and we were both like, and I knew that I had like 10 minutes to get somewhere else away from him and to tell somebody else what had happened, and to tell them not to let me leave because I was going to forget, because he was going to give me retrograde. It was going to give me retrograde amnesia, and I was going to forget that I ever was even in a fight with Gerald and that he had ever even threatened to MDK my whole family and all this, and rip my coat away from me and all that, because if I would have forgotten the entire event, I would have just called Gerald to come get me from wherever I end up in 10, 15 minutes. And so I run as fast as I can, you guys. I go as fast as I can. And I actually make it from where that house is on, where is it? Aldridge? Is that the name of the place? I'm going to have to look it up. Okay, I actually make it from that house in that like semi-nice hood, right? All the way to this other hood that is actually a trailer park that's not part of the nice hood at all anymore, that is supposed to be where the house of the guy that's supposed to be my godfather is, right? And I'm thinking, surely to God, I know that this guy is a bad guy. Like, I know that this guy's a bad guy, just like all the other bad guys, and that he's, way out there, and that he's already on the dude's side, and that he's, he likes, what I mean? And that he likes them more than me, and he's on their side, right? But I'm like, maybe, just maybe, I can get him to like help to like save my life just this once, you know what I mean? And I make it to him and I tell him what's going on. Like, I make it there, and I'm able to tell him what's going on within the time, like within the right time frame, dude. And then the amnesia, the retrograde amnesia starts to set in, and he starts to notice that it's set in, and within just a few minutes, I'm on the phone with Gerald, and I'm telling him where I am, and he's on his way to come get me and stuff like that. And he then like picks me up. He drives me around a few places. He acts like he's gonna, you know what I mean? He takes me to this park and acts like he's about to, drag my body out into the field, and he does all this other stuff, and it just carries on and on like that. And I would go through this with Gerald a few times, where it would be like really obvious that he was like trying to take me out and needed to take me out, but it was like I just kept thwarting his efforts. This would become like kind of how the relationships were between the people that were sent into my life by my family and stuff. And like, and that was 13 years ago, man. But anyways, they They can give you retrograde amnesia just touching you or setting something up for you to pick it up and touch it and get stuff on your skin. They're really, really bad about that, especially. They'll make sure that it's a big mess of stuff outside of your place, all over the deck, all over the entryway, all throughout the entire, all the way down the walkway, down the entire first, second, third flight of steps, stuff everywhere, because they want you to trail this stuff into your apartment and to have it all over your floor, and for your whole life to be surrounded with them. I mean, it gets really bad. But oil ended up being part of a witchcraft thing too. But as far as the drugs and stuff goes, this was a way that they were drugging people. They were putting the drugs into lotions. They were, sorry if I went on too personal of a rant there, and if this is going to be seen by audiences that aren't someday by people who aren't going to know the rest of the story. But anyways, drugs. They'll put drugs in your lotions, dude. They'll put them in your lubes. You won't be able to tell the difference. They can do it to a man. They can do it to a woman. They can make you fall asleep. They can make you stay awake. They can make you have a psychotic episode. They can actually administer medication to you that causes you to go into a psycho. They can actually put it in your stuff, you know what I mean? And then whenever you go get it from, when your friend or whoever hooks you up, they're hooking you up with something that as soon as you use it, you're gonna, somebody's gonna do something weird around you, and you're gonna all of a sudden completely glitch out and fucking, you know what I mean, lose it and go into a complete psychotic episode and stuff like that. It'll be like a mix of drugs that they gave you and things that they did around you that, you know what I mean, that no one would ever put up with or something like that. But they had cameras all over that house that I was in with everybody. I call it a trap house. I call it worse than that, but I'm just going to call it a trap house just to be nice. And, there were cameras everywhere, all throughout that place. And all of that was recorded, everything that happened there. Even I'm pretty sure that them making drugs was being recorded. I mean, I'm not sure, but they seemed to be recording everything that was happening there, and it was being all recorded onto these giant flash drive things, hard drive things. But anyways, they would get, now I did mention, one person who was, assassinated there in Amarillo. And that it was made to just seem like, I guess, an asthma attack. Okay. But she was the one who told me, and I actually, at the time that she told me this, Jesse, which is somebody who I've named in a different video, and people would know who I'm talking about, who are from Amarillo, some of them. Jesse was actually standing behind a curtain, which we didn't know until after she had said this, but she began to tell me about how the just basic crystal methamphetamine throughout Amarillo was being laced with different drugs, and that it was causing people to go through brain damage and even death from the withdrawals. So, it wasn't just, it was people were being plagued with a mega drug without their knowledge. They were being told that it was simple methamphetamines, and I do believe that it's still happening, actually. And it was literally, I'm going to call it a super drug, because what they would do, they would take a bunch of crystal methamphetamine, right? And they would like get it down to its liquid. They would turn it back to liquid form, and then they would take I think that they would even purify it a little bit. They would take some of like the trash out of it, and then they would take a little bit of heroin, and they would mix heroin into it. Sometimes they would take heroin and MDMA. They would mix the heroin with MDMA or whatever, or however they do it, and then they would mix that crystal stuff with this crystal stuff, all of it. Anyways, they throw some heroin in there. You could probably even just throw powdered heroin in there, but the heroin that I saw them using was yellow crystals. And they told me that was heroin, which is weird. That was like the only heroin that I've ever seen that was like that. But anyways, so they were putting that in there. They would put a little bit of morphine into it. MDMA was one of the main things. If they didn't put it in every time, then they would put it in once in a while, because MDMA was supposed to be like one of the major things that was making it so whacked out. When they wanted to make people trip out, apparently they would add Klonopins, broke down Klonopin. That was one of the things that would especially make people trip out, make them really, really upset, make you really upset, dude. But they wouldn't add that to whole batches. To whole batches, they would add, there were certain benzo pharmaceuticals that they would add, and those, they would make sure that the side effects of those were side effects like insomnia, loss of appetite, just different things that would mimic methamphetamine use and the withdrawal symptoms as well. So they could even, so they were like mixing they were mixing everything together, and then they get everything mixed together, and then they would have like this giant this kind of like machine thing, and they had these big cookie sheets, these big massive cookie sheets, like the biggest cookie sheets I've ever seen in my whole life. And they would take this, it was like this giant machine, it was like this long thing, and they would take it and they would just spray all of that whatever liquid stuff all over all of these trays, these huge massive trays, just completely sprayed down with this stuff. And then they would like let it dry a little bit, and they would like pack everything up, and then they would set those trays up in the attic at that house that belonged to that one chick that he kept giving seizures to. As far as like when I was there, that was like the only house that I saw them actually like making this stuff in and storing it and stuff, which I wouldn't be talking to you about today if it weren't for how extreme the crime and sex trafficking and child trafficking ring is that everybody got themselves involved in, and how it has actually affected me and children, even more children than even just my own. I mean, I've had to watch teenage boys be walked out across the street knowing that those boys are going across the street to be sold, and that they don't want to be sold, and they've been up for days and they're exhausted and messed up, and they probably haven't eaten for days, and and that's the shit that I had to watch a few years ago, and and it's only gotten worse since then. So up in the attic there at the house was also apparently women were being kept there, and apparently they were being kept asleep. And Gerald, uh, along with a few other people, spent some time over in Iraq, where they were introduced to these brothels, supposedly, where they learned a lot more about keeping women under control. So, in the attic was a space that I was never invited, and hopefully I was never kept up there, and thank God. Um, yeah, and they would put these giant trays up there, and those trays would grow what they would all like to call biological meth. And they would say that the meth was alive and that it was made out of some biological substances, um, or even nanotechnology. I'm not real sure, but that whatever this biological agent or substance was, and you guys have probably heard, how you crackheads have probably heard this, that that whenever they used it or injected it or anything like that, that it created a crystalline, alien-like, something in the back of your on your spinal cord or column or something like that, and that it stayed with you forever, and that it was a part of your, it was like being taken over by like an alien or something like that, or nanotech or something like that, was how they kind of explained it. But I wasn't fully on board with that part. I just understood that they were mixing a bunch of different drugs together, and that they were introducing it to society as though it was just meth, and that people said it was absolutely destroying these people's lives in a very short amount of time, because um uh well, partially because they were just giving it away. They were practically just giving it away. And they'd give it away, give it away, give it away, give it away like that, and then all of a sudden, I don't know. They had these weird cycles, and they had these weird methods and these things that they would do with these people, and before you know it, a person's whole house would be emptied, their lives would be destroyed, their kids would have been taken, they would have experienced whatever trauma. You'd walk in their houses, and there might be like a pair of pants that somebody pissed and shit in. Sorry, but I'm just being real with you. And a pile of needles on the floor, and some of those famous Amarillo styrofoam 32-ounce Cokes standing around. And you could always tell who was there, because certain people use a certain amount of lids. Certain people do certain different things to their lids or to their cups and stuff like that. And anyway, but yeah, they were using that to basically rob people of anything that they had. Because as Natalie would tell me, um, when people ran out of it, it wasn't just like oh, I just have to stop doing this for a few days and I'll feel better. The way that, it would normally be, or the way that it used to be, because they added all this extra stuff to it, you would try to stop using, and you might go a week thinking that you'd feel better later and not feel better. You might go 2 weeks, you're still laying in bed trying to feel better. 3 weeks in, you're losing your life. People are questioning what's wrong with you. Like, people are starting to get onto you. People are starting to ask questions. A month in, 6 weeks in, it's past it. People have already been slamming doors. You know what I mean? It actually took me laying in bed for a solid 6 weeks, before I could actually stop feeling the withdrawal symptoms of, uh, what they were doing. And whenever I went from Amarillo and went to West Virginia, a very similar practice had taken hold. The only difference was that by the time that it got to West Virginia, most of the purity of whatever actual drugs there were had been removed, and you were mostly doing whatever extra weird stuff people were putting in it, and you were getting hardly any of the actual substance that you were trying to be addicted to. So in some ways it sets it up to make it easier for people to quit, but in other ways it was set up to be even more of a challenge, and for things to be even, rougher and scruffer and harder, and sometimes something about that can be addictive all in itself. So it would be like, if you were a guy and some girls, or even one girl, wanted to maybe get you to go to sleep so that she could go through your cell phone, or she could go through your wallet, or she could go through your house and, take whatever she needed or photograph whatever information. A girl doesn't actually have to steal your credit card. She can just pull it out and take pictures of either side, and blam, she's got your credit card. She has a copy of your credit card, basically. She's got a copy of your driver's license now. She's got a copy of your birth certificate, of your social security card. Nothing actually has to be missing from your house. And you don't ever have to feel like you were poisoned or anything like that, or drugged or anything, for you to have been drugged, and for you to have been poisoned, or for you to have been robbed blind. Nothing has to be missing from your house ever at all for you to be for you to have been robbed blind. I walked into that household in the first place, and everybody, even the girls, were telling me about how, he made these really great lotions, and that he made these essential oils, and that he was this incredible masseuse, and he made all these great different oils, and no one ever offered me a massage. No one ever said, hey, you want to smell this essential oil stuff or anything. The oils just came with, a certain nature of things, which, that ends up being accompanied by, the, drugs and sex end up going hand in hand, especially whenever it comes to a lot of these hard drugs and intravenous drug use. Which, let's face it, it's all over Amarillo, and it's all over the United States. I can't speak for any other country. I've never been to any other country, but I know that in Amarillo, it's such a normal thing that we have, like, in a lot of different houses, we've got coffee canister things, and there's like a hole cut out in the top, and that's where everybody was like everybody puts their dirty needles and stuff, and then they're able to, get them out of the house somehow. They have their, they either have a needle exchange, or they have some way that they are able to get rid of those. But, that 13, 14 years ago, or whenever it was, whenever my family was able to, basically have me hijacked by, a certain particular group of people, who I would find out later on may have had more to do, had a little bit more to do with my little sister than I realized before. But, and then also in that house, lingered some people that I didn't know were hanging out. And then, as I said, everything was being recorded as well. Some of these people would be recorded being drugged, very literally, and that would end up being live streamed on the dark web. So they would do something really cruel to somebody, like drug them and cause them to, have a seizure, and then, have that whole thing recorded and sell that over the dark web and make money for it. You know what I mean? While that victim, all they get is a hotel stay, not a hotel stay, a hospital visit, a hospital stay, several long hospital stays, and, their house is used by people who would rather them be in the hospital. certain kinds, they would have like one certain stash that was meant to be like the good stuff for certain guys, certain of the guys, or for certain people who kind of knew what was going on. And then the other stashes were what they would call hordope, and that would go to like anybody who they were trying to control, basically, men or women. When they would give it to the women, by giving it to the women, it makes it to where the women have problems with their memory recall. They have trouble explaining. They start to have trouble just relaying simple information. It takes them a little. It takes a little bit longer for them to relay the information. It can cause people to begin to lose their hand-eye coordination. I've seen the women just almost completely passed out like zombies, like just hold, like not really even holding themselves up, not even really, like just it's all they can do just to hold themselves up, just to be a participant in their lives at the moment, but they can't even respond. Like, chicks that are passengers in vehicles that are completely out of it, or dudes passengers in vehicles that are just completely out of it. And um you know but one chick, dude, especially, I saw that they made her a zombie for a while, dude. She just was like basically sitting up but asleep the whole time. And I know she was upset because I guess one of her kids passed away or something like that. Um, anyways, they did some really messed up stuff to her, and I know she was trying to hit me up afterwards, trying to get me to talk to her. Uh, uh, I think that she might have been in trouble, but like I was too afraid to talk to her. Um, and then also sometimes they weren't just putting stuff in each other's drugs. Sometimes they were putting stuff in each other's rigs. And sometimes they would poison them. Sometimes they would break the seals. Sometimes they would mess up the glue or mess them up, or even make sure that they got infected blood in them, and then um, like let somebody else use them, and they would even film that sometimes too. Um, most people don't know that someone can walk up to you and put a substance on you and make you, and that might influence you somehow. Um, that could cause you to forget everything that's happened for the last hour. Or it could cause you to forget everything that happened for the last 3 weeks, and you might not even begin to actually retain real like memories for another 3 weeks. Uh, you know, and the girls that were kept up in the attic, and girls being kept asleep like that, they were calling it sleeping beauty and other nasty terminology. Um, it's they could basically keep a girl under as long as they wanted, and then sometimes even let her wake up, or him, or whatever, let them wake up for a little while, and basically know the state of affairs and what's happening to them, and not entirely know how long they've been there or if anything will ever change, and then they're made to go back to sleep again. And a person might wake up to that once over the course of any amount of time at all. A person could wake up to it 100 times. A person could wake up to it every time. You know what I'm saying? There's no telling while they're being kept under, and um, it doesn't take, um, you know, it doesn't necessarily take the same equipment that it would to keep somebody under in a hospital, to keep them under at the house. When people, if they suddenly don't have access to the pharmaceutical medications, they can also use, the street and or over some over the counter medications sometimes will also do the trick. This video might have been just a little bit all over the place, but I really just wanted to get the word out about the different lubes, oils, lotions, druggings, and even the very special targeting of people who are already technically disabled. And that isn't even beginning to get into the things that are done whenever they begin to add witchcraft and that sort of thing into it. I didn't even hit on that yet. That doesn't even begin to hit on any of the other horrible things that you would have that people have to worry about in a trap house or in Amarillo. Like, this is just the beginning. It's a different kind of addiction. It's like somebody who just wanted to do meth, you know what I mean? Who just wanted to smoke a little bit of meth or whatever. Not that I'm saying that that's innocent, I guess, but somebody who just smoked some meth, they're now addicted to, morphine, heroin, um, you know, anywhere between 1 and 20 different kinds of pharmaceutical medications. They get all weird because they did some MDMA. Now they're going to have to wait 6 weeks before they can get over that. Or it's got some fentanyl, or it's got some carfentanil in it. Unfortunately, in Amarillo, Texas especially, if you're going to use any kind of hard drug, if I'm telling you, if you don't drug test yourself within an hour of taking whatever drug that it was, you might not ever find out you may never find out anyways what was really in those drugs. They could put antibiotics in those drugs. They can put, even just a little bit of certain antibiotics is enough to kill, like, a couple horses. The body, all it has to do is stay alive for a certain amount of hours, and, to get something like antibiotics or something, different things like that out of the system. And then people don't even know what it was that caused whatever detriment or damage or handicap or trauma to that person. Here, out in Appalachia, especially, it's also, I've heard being practiced on the ladies of the night here on the trafficking victims, that they are being injected with insulin, and that insulin is supposed to be one of the things that was taking them out here too. I know that down in Texas, they were also mixing glycerin and sugar into their stuff, and that was giving people, honestly, and that was giving people more of a rush. This stuff was so addictive that they could get anybody addicted to it. They could get your grandma addicted to it. It was really that bad. And they could get any and everybody addicted to it and having the time of their lives, especially because they were so good at mixing the getting it on into the drug use, you know what I mean? And it would like compound an addiction, you know what I mean? Like complicate an addiction. Some of the other women who were like prostitutes and stuff like that, especially, and then some who weren't, they knew what was going on with the pharmaceuticals, and that there was kind of an experiment going on. And they thought that it was funny. Like, I sort of understand how they thought that it was funny, even though it totally wasn't funny. It was like this experimental, and they did talk about, there's one girl, Andrea, definitely, who talked about how Gerald was experimenting on all the different girls in the house, putting different, cutting down different pills and adding them to their drugs, and then like giving it, making sure that it was administered to them, and then seeing how they would react to it. And it reminded me a lot of the movie, The Young Poisoner's Handbook. If you haven't seen that, you've got to see that movie, because that is what this stuff reminds me of so bad, you guys. Like, all around me for years now, Young Poisoner's Handbook, you got to see it. And ironically, the person who had me sit down and watch that is actually my uncle, who, you know what I mean, was, I guess, taught by the best. My uncle actually ends up being, my aunt and uncle, Chris and Danny, end up being the people who were the affiliates of the white supremacy ring, who, and that would be the group of people who would try to pull me into white supremacy gangs. They tried to get me to join their white gangs. Like that, I guess they were trying to get me to join their white gangs and get me to become, the man with them, and to become a prostitute with all their prostitutes and stuff. Yeah. That ended up all being like right after my grandpa passed away. Like, they would not have been able to get away with that. They would not have been, nothing like that would have been able to happen while my grandpa was still alive. No way. He definitely would have noticed. He definitely would have called people out. Everybody would have got rung over that. My whole family would have got chewed out over if my grandpa. And that's the thing, is I swear they all this made my grandpa roll over in his grave, dude. If you were the grandfather, if you were any of the grandfathers over any of us in this situation, you would have also rolled over in your grave, dude, for real. Like, it's been bad. I've picked up my phone before and that been stuff on it, and me be like, what is this all over my phone? Oil that wasn't from me. Like, I'm not a toddler. I'm not just gonna get nasty. Once in a while I get pizza grease on my phone, but once in a while it was not just me. Once in a while I would open my own front door or go to open my car door, and now my hand is covered in oil. Or months ago, as I was passing through Missouri and Arkansas, a hotel clerk, they'd set this hotel clerk up to hand me a hotel key, and the hotel key was, I have a video about this too. I might have it on private on here, but they made the whole hotel key was completely covered in oil. It was absolutely horrible. Like, I had to go into the bathroom and hurry up and like try to wash the stuff off my hands, try to wash it off of that card. It had already begun to set into my skin. I don't even know what was in it or on it. And that time, that was a Hindu family that owned that hotel. And I do know that some of these foreigners they'll pretend that they're Hindu or pretend that they're Muslim or whatever, but they're actually practicing witchcraft. And I guess a lot of these hotel owners that are Hindu, and I don't know, but they're practicing witchcraft. And one of the ways that they use oils in their witchcrafts and stuff like that. And so, as far as the trap house that I'm talking about, and the events that would happen there and the things that I would learn about there, the oil was a big deal in the situation without me knowing whether or not or that witchcraft was involved behind the scenes at all. Oil ended up, these oils, lotions, lubrications, and stuff like that. Like, people should really give each other the heads up about it. No pun intended. But like, I really wanted people to know about this 13 years ago. They really put me through a lot to make sure that I wouldn't be able to tell people about that. And yeah, so that at least covers a little bit about some of the weird dangers, I'm gonna say. Oh, and also I forgot this one part too. And of course didn't get to a lot of parts about this, but an opposition. Okay, so there were some people who started to catch on that Gerald was not really giving them normal stuff, because I mean he was making all that stuff, they were making all that stuff, and then they were selling it out. Well, some of these people that they were selling it to, they actually did care that they weren't doing things like heroin and morphine and drugging themselves and drugging the women in their lives, and that they actually cared about not having retrograde amnesia and just their whole lives being destroyed and things like that. So I did see like a couple of these guys actually speak up and be like and be like, hey bro, did you you know uh, and Gerald was really bad about doing everybody's old ladies too. So it was like these dudes, it was like he'd hook these dudes up, but he'd hook them up with bags of like stuff that, yeah, sure, it's the greatest thing on the planet, but it ain't the real deal. And then while you're going to be basically drugging me, then you're going to be messing with my old lady. And that's what he would do. He would sleep with almost every single one of these dudes, old ladies, he would sleep with while he was hooking everybody up with messed up drugs. And there were a lot of people that knew what he was doing. And like, it was stuff like, it was such a big deal while it was going on. Like, we couldn't believe that the shit wasn't like being broadcast across the news. But it was almost like, to Gerald, all drugs were the same. That if you came to buy one thing from him, he might as well just give you everything all at once, as best as anybody could have put it together, which was kind of a bizarre mentality. Like, it was effective with a lot of people. A lot of people were like, I don't even care what that was. That was the best thing I've ever had. Give me some more. And then there were a lot of people who were like, there were a lot of people who were bothered, and he began to make enemies of these different people who had got bought from him, basically. And like, it's not that big of a secret because the dude already got busted, and it's in the newspaper. It was in the newspaper, a decade ago or thereabouts, whenever he got busted for having the shit with intent to deliver. So I'm not exactly telling people shit that they don't already know. All public information that can be looked up. Dude already did time after getting in trouble for a little bit of what I'm talking about. So at least that part, I don't have to worry about people being like, oh, she's a dirty little rat. People died. And that kind of didn't stop. And I'm trying to kind of prevent more death. So I definitely am fucking telling people this shit. But anyways, Gerald would very quickly make an enemy of any dude, especially one who had a quite attractive girlfriend or anyone attractive attached to them whatsoever. It didn't matter if it was even a minor. It could be their own kid. And it didn't matter if Gerald targeted somebody. If he had his eye on somebody, he would find a way to spend at least 30 minutes in the shower with them. I was at a house where a mother allowed her minor kid to be in the shower with Gerald for at least an hour, while I just, they wanted me to just die at the time, basically just anything to get me out of the way so that the mom could get paid for what was going on. So I just acted like I was asleep on the couch. I mean, how can you really go to sleep? Anyways, he would make enemies of these dudes, and then he would start hooking the dudes up with bad stuff, making it to where Gerald was the only one who had good stuff. And if any of the girls wanted to do any good stuff, then they would go hang out with Gerald. And so all these dudes would lose their clients. They would lose their girlfriends, their wives, their kids, their sisters, their anybody, basically. And these people systematically, and there were a few of them, it wasn't just him, there were a few of them who were really good at just absolutely taking a person's life apart. And when you took a few of those people who were good at that and you had them working all together on the same person, that, you know, sometimes even if people knew what was up, they hardly stood a chance. And I'm not going to apologize, of course, for my language or the graphic nature of this content, because it isn't for kids, and I've marked on all of my stuff that it isn't for kids, but I'm not moving it to another platform because it is really important that everyone has access to the information, at least, and especially right now. And then also, whenever it came to the disposal of people's utensils, their friends, people were actually able to get a hold of, they were trying to use people's dirty needles to set them up, which apparently didn't work, because the investigators actually have a way of testing and seeing when a person's blood, what time frame it's from. And I guess these dorks were making the mistake of taking dirty needles from earlier time frames and trying to leave them at the scenes of current, what would at that point be current homicides and investigations and stuff like that. And anyways, that was one of the dumb things that they were doing. And, you know, that could happen to anybody, is them to take your DNA from any of those, you know, items, you know, drug use items, and to place that at the scene of a crime, or even place your DNA in or on somebody. Just the, you know what I mean? Just all the different ideas that they came up with, and all the different access that you actually give to people when you involve drugs into your life, or you know, but some people don't really have a choice. You know what I mean? Some people really are being trafficked, sex trafficked. They've been targeted. They're, you know, targeted people, or, you know, there's men and women who are both forced into dealing drugs and prostitution and all of that. And, you know, various forms of crime. So I understand that too. And I have no idea how many people are actually going to end up seeing this, and like I said, I'm kind of sorry for it being all over the place, but I'm pretty sure that everybody gets an idea of what I mean by the different druggings. And so, you know, be careful with the lubes. I honestly, I would suggest just, you know, abstinence from risky behaviors and drug use. You don't actually know what's in all of that stuff. And, you know, just so much. It's literally like, I feel like, even though I just told you so much, it feels like it's still so much sitting on my chest. I never did find out about who the girls were in the attic. I couldn't tell you if they're still in the attic. I know that that house was busted at one point. I don't know what has become of it since. I don't know what became of everybody who would have been hanging out at that house. I know that there are certain people who are in that group of people who very well could be subpoenaed to testify about some murders. But as to whether or not that will happen ever, I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of information there if it's actually broken down. And just thanks for listening. I don't entirely have the best energy at the moment, and I'm a little bit weird. Things are a little bit weird, but I'm doing my best. All I can think to say is that, watch your food, watch your drink. I've also had people just seem like they just put a fingerprint of something on, a cup, at just the mouthpiece. You can even pass a joint around a room, or be passing a cigarette back and forth with somebody, and them get something all over your, cigarette. You got to be really careful whenever it comes to allowing people to share anything with you these days, or sharing yourself with others, or sharing anything with anybody, or buying anything from anybody. It's just, it's really so dangerous. And I watched so many people lose their properties and their lives within such a short time frame. They're just in Amarillo alone. um, and maybe, and for me to speak up about it at the time, and be so worried about Amarillo, and for my family just to keep it all hush hush, and for me to even have had the chance to speak up to law enforcement, and for them to make sure that they kept me and the whole situation and everything hush hush. And here it's 14 years later, 13 years later. So it's not like you guys were worried about, keeping any kind of investigation matters hush hush, which is part of the reason why I stayed so quiet about stuff all along. In part was because I actually thought that there were active investigations happening, and that I would be able to explain this information long before now, and potentially save lives. So, you know what I mean? That's something that was happening 13, 14 years ago or whatever. Now I can't even tell you if it's still happening. I'm sure that it is. I'm sure that it is still happening. So, I think that is a fair warning for uh, people now, just as well as it would have been 13 years ago. All right. Thanks, and God bless.